Julian, how are you?
Doing fantastic.
9 days out, man. How are you feeling?
I feel great. Just got my last sparring session in. Everything feels like it's on point. I feel sharp, strong. Weight's good, so ready to go.
How'd your last sparring go?
Sparring went very well. Didn't get no injuries, no cuts, no bruises, and I don't spar with headgear, so sometimes you're worried about that kind of thing where, it could be an inadvertent elbow or some Velcro or something that can cut you, but none of that happened, so I'm happy with the outcome of sparring and safely moving on and being ready for my fight.
Why don't you spar with headgear?
It just kind of gets in my way, honestly, and I feel like when you're used to slipping a small amount, the headgear makes you have to slip more, and then you're kind of doing things that you're not normally doing, and it can affect the fight a little bit. Like if I'm slipping a little too much because I'm used to having headgear on, or having to fix the headgear, or grappling and people are grabbing the headgear versus not having the headgear. So I prefer to spar as close to fighting as possible.
Before we talk about your upcoming fight, man, I want to go back to the Caceres fight, man. First of all, what were the emotions like after that fight?
I've done that same exact thing has happened before where I've been knocked out, and I don't want to say it gets easier, but it's easier to deal with it and kind of internalize it. And for me, I just, had to, get past that first 20-30 minutes of sheer anger and frustration in the situation, and just understand that these things happen. I mean, like I said to you before, it's like flipping a coin. You can do all the research, you can study somebody, you can have months to get ready to fight these guys, and then when you get in there, you don't know until you get in there, and it becomes a fight. So my old coach used to say sometimes a fight breaks out in an MMA match, and that's so true, because you want to be precise, you want to be, as technical as possible, but sometimes a fight breaks out in those things, and you might get caught with something that you didn't see coming, and those are the things that knock you out, and, props to Caceres on that, but, it sucks to be on the receiving end of that.
What's the biggest thing you took from that fight?
I would say the biggest thing I took from that fight was just kind of the camp leading up. The weight cut was probably one of my best weight cuts, so there's things I took away from that. Obviously, got a lot of sparring with southpaws, so took a lot of little details that southpaws like to do, and have tried to mix it up into my own game, so I can even switch my stance and take advantage of some of those things that I was watching out for Alex to do. So I was able to take some of those things, and just basically the whole camp. Obviously the fight was only 2 minutes long, so it's hard to really take things from that. I felt like I was really getting in the groove right before I got knocked out, and I felt good about the situation. I was getting really comfortable. But there's hardly much that I can take from the actual fight, but it's basically the camp leading up that I took a lot of things from.
It was just a wild kick, right? You obviously didn't see it coming, right? So
it's just like one of those things. I did the same thing to Nate Land, where I caught him with a crazy jumping knee, and sometimes you're on the receiving end, and sometimes you're the one dishing it out, and like I said, you're flipping a coin sometimes.
Fighting Fernando Padilla, man. When the fight was announced, a lot of people were just like, it's kind of a weird matchup, because it's making your UFC debut. You were on this run, fighting for a top 15. Were you kind of confused about the matchup?
Yeah, I was a bit, I was definitely a little confused, but I was, easily going to say yes, but just because, there's a lot of guys, in the top, 25, 20, and even top 15 that they could have thrown my way that would have been, I feel like, tougher matches in the sense of experience and overall knowledge of fighting, and with Padilla, it's his debut. He hasn't fought for a couple of years, so I think there's going to be a little more added stress on his end. I've been here and done it a million times, and also I'm not going to say no to the UFC. Sometimes you feel a little obligated to say yes, and so for me, it's basically any name that they would have said. It's more about dates, and timing. Like if they would have given me a really tough out 2 weeks, and I'm a bit heavy, like these things, maybe I would have to say no to those kind of things, but with a full camp, they give me any name, I gotta say yes, or that's how I feel about it. So, and I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that the UFC can call and be like, hey, do you want to fight this guy? Yes, no problem. And so when they told me about it, I already kind of felt like I was gonna say yes anyways, and then I looked him up, and one of my coaches knows him pretty well, and so talked to my coaches, and we all agreed on it, and but there really wasn't going to be any disagreement, really. It wasn't like an undefeated Russian dude who's fought, who's like 10-0 in the UFC on 2 weeks' notice. It's not so. Besides that, it's always going to be a yes, and so I was happy to take the fight.
Was it also kind of like You wanted to get the last loss out from under you and just kind of jump back into a fight?
Yeah, for sure. You want to get you kind of encompass your entire like world around your fight camp, and then like for me right now, like I'm not even thinking about the fight necessarily. It's kind of like I'm more focused on the weight. It's like you lead up with the weight cut, and I'm more like anxious about making sure my weight's off or that I get the weight off, and so I don't even think about the fight and get the anxieties of the fight until after I make weight, and then even after that, then I'm just happy. I'm just so happy that I'm eating and that I'm enjoying myself that I don't really get any more anxieties of fights, and I've done a lot, and so I kind of have my own process. But I'm just just leading into this. I want to get the last fight out of my head a little bit, but at the same time, those are the things that give me the motivation to work hard, because I want to get that feeling of winning again. When you win fights, you forget that you need to sit down and really digest and dissect your fight game and fix up the details. When you're winning, you're just like, oh, everything's good. I just won my fight. I did what I was supposed to do. But when you lose, you're like, wait, what the hell am I doing wrong? And then you can really sit down and digest. And for me, that's been one of the biggest things as well. But I want to move on, but at the same time, I want to take things from all the losses I've had.
You talk about the weight, and you do cut a lot of weight, but like, is a move to lightweight, like, is a permanent move to lightweights coming sooner than later, or is just you're kind of okay with the weight and it's just kind of part of the job?
Yeah, it's just part of the job. I mean, everybody's cutting a lot of weight. I mean, you see some of these lightweights that like walk around up to 200 pounds. So like, if I move to lightweight, I mean, there's a decent amount of guys I could see myself fighting at lightweight and doing well against. But there's also like a few handfuls of guys that are just gigantic, like they are cutting an immense amount of weight, and I can get the weight off relatively easy. I gotta, like I said, you want to have time to be able to do these things. But I feel comfortable in being able to get the weight off and fighting to my full potential the next day. And once my fighting is hindered by the weight cut, then I would decide to move up. But as of right now, there's really no thought about moving to lightweight.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts on Fernando? What are your thoughts on the matchup itself?
I like Fernando as a matchup just because we're both long, lanky, kind of strikers with good jiu-jitsu as well. I think we're pretty similar in a sense. I like the matchup because I know he's going to want to stand and trade with me, and he's not afraid to grapple as well. But I think that's where I beat him is on the feet. I think if I keep it on the feet, my pressure over 3 rounds will end up breaking him, and that's with all my fights I want to do that. With the Caceres fight, that was the game plan too, was just keep the pressure on him and then keep pressing forward. It just only lasted 2 minutes, so I wanted to get to the last 2 minutes, not be done in the first 2 minutes. And so with Fernando, it's all about being safe and and keep my defenses up early on, and then slowly but surely put the pressure on him and kind of break him. A couple of fights he had to go, it seemed like he kind of broke in the third, and he won that fight actually. So he won the first 2 rounds, and it seemed the third round he seemed to break a little bit. So for me, that's where I want to get him, and that's where I want to beat him.
Kind of already mentioned it, but it's his UFC debut. He's been off for a couple years.
Yeah.
You've had so much UFC experience. Like, do you think that's going to be a detriment to him?
I really don't know. I mean, from an outside looking in, if I don't know the guy, I would say yes, for sure. I mean, you gotta. UFC debut, haven't fought for a couple of years. I get anxious about fighting in the UFC, and I've done it a million times, and I've and I'm comfortable with it. Like, I'm really comfortable with fighting, and I'm probably one of the more cool, calm, and collected guys that I know. Even like when I go, I get more nervous watching my friends fight than when I fight, and I think a lot of guys are like that too. But even for me, being as cool and calm, I get nervous, so I can only imagine what he was going through his head. I mean, he's, this is like what he's been working his whole life for. Same with me. Like the first couple of UFC fights, I was like tunnel vision. I was like, the lights, everything, Bruce Buffer, like all the things were just insane to me. You feel like you're in a dream. You're kind of out of body experience. And so for me, I'm going to be centered. I'm going to be there. And for him, if he's not, it's going to be bad on him. He's going to, if he has any kind of filling out process that he needs to get through, it's going to be a detriment because I'm going to be already comfortable in there, ready to go.
At the end of the day, April 29th, next Saturday, how do you get your hand raised?
TKO in the 3rd round, baby.
I did want to ask one of your former opponents, Steven Peterson, announced his retirement after his last fight. And I just want to know, that was one of the fights of the year. It was a fucking war, man. I just kind of know, like, what were your thoughts on his retirement?
You know, I think everybody comes to a point where they, you know, they start thinking about these things. Like, even me, like, I'm 33, which isn't old, but it's not young either. You know, there's guys in the UFC that are over 10 years younger than me. And so I think, but also now you see a lot of guys still fighting in the UFC, even in close to 40 and even in their 40s and doing well, even at some of the lighter weights. And so it's one of those things where you're just like, as long as I'm healthy, I want to keep going. And for him, if he's not healthy, if he has other things outside of fighting that are kind of hindering his ability to get better at fighting and to compete with the best, then by all means you should retire. For me, if I go out there and I can't compete with like a guy like Fernando Padilla who's making his debut, then maybe I don't belong in the UFC. And I feel like maybe his last fight, you know, it was a bad fight for him, you know, and he didn't look good in there. And I'm not trying to disrespect him at all, because me and him lost a couple years off our lives together, and so I built a respect with him for that. But you know, if he doesn't feel like he can keep up anymore, you know, it's better to hang the hat up early like that than to hang on and be a guy like, you know, Donald Cerrone, who lost 5 in a row, Marlon Moraes, who's been knocked out 5, 6 in a row. You know, some of these guys that just keep, you know, kind of tarnishing their legacy. And not to say that Peterson has like some huge legacy, but, you know, for him and his family, and later on in the years, he wants to be proud of what he's done. And if he loses 4 or 5 fights in a row, he might not have that anymore. And so, you know, hats off to him, and I hope he's successful in the endeavors after fighting, because I know that's really hard as well. I have no idea what I'm going to do after fighting, you know. I mean, small ideas here and there, but this is what I've put in 15 years, my last 15 years of my life into this. I haven't been doing accounting on the side. I haven't been, you know, getting, you know, my bachelor's and other things, you know. So I feel like it's difficult to move on past fighting. And so anybody that is, all is well to them, and I hope that he's successful.
Awesome. And then finally, what do you want your year to look like, man? Like, what are some goals that you're setting for yourself?
I want to get at least a couple of wins in the UFC this year, and I really want to just get back on track. You know, that's really what it is, and it just boils down to getting wins. You know, and I don't want to be like thinking about other things ahead. I got a fight right now against Fernando Padilla, and I got to make sure that I'm fully focused on that. And so, really the only goal that I have of 2023 is to beat Fernando Padilla as of right now. The day after that is when I start making a new goal. So
Gotcha. Awesome, Julian. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Of course.
If you want to plug your social media, any sponsors you might have, and if you want to thank anybody, the floor is yours.
Yeah, obviously I want to thank all the fans, all my friends, all my family. And most importantly, I want to thank my management, Iridium Sports Agency, and Jason House, and all those guys over there, because without them, I probably wouldn't be in the UFC or had been given so many shots in the UFC. It's one thing to push for yourself, but it's another to have somebody that manages you that also puts as much work in as you are putting in the gym. So huge shout out to those guys. And my Instagram, Julian_Erosa, is the best way to get a hold of me. I really don't use Facebook as much. So if you want to get a hold of me, or you want to see any of my sponsors or anything that I got going on in my life, my Instagram is the best to follow.
Boom.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.